Subscribe to LearnCab and hit the bell icon to get notified.
Welcome back everyone. May revision. May 2021 revision. We should know what will be the syllabus freezing date. Till what date, whatever changes has come in indirect taxes, I should learn. So for all the cases of indirect taxes, we should understand that whatever changes that has happened till 31st of October 2020, which means that there was Finance Act 2020. Earlier, we had Finance Act 2019 too. Then Finance Act 2019 would have been already discussed. Plus, there are notifications. Plus, there are circulars. All of this has to be discussed. So if the examination is in May, normal cases, 6 months prior to the examination, whatever changes that happens, that has to be discussed and that has to be understood for that particular examination. So whatever changes happened after 31st of October, even if you're reading it on online platforms, if anybody is doing internship, you would have already heard about that particular changes for the purpose of your internship, doing GST filing or something. Those things are not applicable for your exam. Is the first important point that you have to remember. Now, how many changes are there? It is comparatively less. Like your last exam or last to last exam, the number of changes is less. But then there are few changes that is important and it would be tested. There is a high chance that it would be tested in the examination. So in this particular session, we are going to cover all the amendments, including going through the entire topic one by one. Just to start off with, so how many chapters we do have in intermediate? We have 10 chapters. And how do we divide these chapters? The first chapter is introduction, which is not something that will have a lot of questions from. Amendments will have the higher priority. Then we have chapters like supply and charge, which gives you basics. Then you have number-based questions in chapters like time of supply, number of date-based questions in value of supply, then in input tax credit. Then you have chapters like registration and exemption, wherein you will have to go through the entire topic. Then you have procedural chapters like invoice, payment chapter, and returns. These are the structure of your chapters, and we are going to have target for each of the day. What is that we are going to cover? And based on that, you can prepare. So what I'm trying to tell you is that today, when you're watching this particular session, after this particular session, what I'll recommend you to do is that try to do the next topics so that you would have had an overall understanding or maybe some understanding. So it'll be easy for you to grasp on further. And the questions, whatever questions that we're going to solve in the classes, that also I will share it out to all of you. So you can keep the questions. If you want to keep a printout, you can do that. Or if you're okay with keeping it in, if you're okay with having a PDF and then referring from that, that's also fine. And all the questions that I'm going to give you answers as well, the updated answers as well, so that you can refer all those. And it is important that for a subject like indirect taxes, you should spend time together with your classes, which means that if you're picking up 5 days of your efforts on indirect taxes revision, you should ensure that you give that entire 5 day on this subject, which means attend the classes, also try to revise at your end the entire topic. Okay. Now let's get started with, just to ensure that we all are in line. Before anybody start discussing about taxes, it is important that they talk to you regarding the article in the Constitution that gives the power to the government to frame these taxes. There are 3 articles in the Constitution that I want you to just have a look at. Article 265, Article 245 and Article 246. These are the three articles that we need to have a look before we talk about any taxes in India. First point in Article 265, what it says, let's look at this. No tax can be collected without authority of law. Since you have MCQ questions coming in, even the smallest of topics now can be thought about. Can they ask an MCQ question from this? If so, should I not learn this particular topic? That's how you should read your textbook. Now, it says that in Article 265, there is no tax can be collected without authority of law. What does that mean? If you want to collect a taxes, there should be an act behind it. If you're talking about income tax, if you want to tax on income, you need an act called Income Tax Act behind it. That's all they're saying that. So tomorrow, if the government wants to tax people who are drinking tea, if somebody is drinking too much of tea like me, and they wanted to tax them, then first of all, they need to have an act called as Tea Tax Act. That simple it is. Article 245 says, in India, there are two places where you can actually frame rules and regulation for an act. There are two places in India where you can make the law. Which are the places? One is Parliament, wherein central government will make the law, and another one is legislative assemblies, wherein the state government will make the law. Very simple understanding again. So Article 265, Article 245, these two gives the basis. Now there is one more article called as Article 246, which in 7th schedule talks about three lists. List 1, 2, 3. List 1 is called as union list, list 2 is called as state list, and list 3 is called as concurrent list. Now, what is the importance of these lists? There is a fundamental understanding that you need to have. Now, the question that you need to ask yourself is whether the constitution is giving the government power to collect taxes, or are the government getting power to make law relating to a tax? The answer is they are getting the power to frame rules and regulation from the constitution. In turn, what I meant is, just because constitution talks about an item which can be taxed, it does not mean that the moment you bring an item inside constitution, government will start collecting taxes from the next day. When will they be able to collect taxes? They will be able to collect taxes only from the day on which their act becomes effective, which means that if I wanted to introduce a new taxes, what will be the order of activity that has to happen? Very simply put in, the order of activity would be, first, I will check on the constitution whether I have the right to collect this particular taxes or not. Okay, so I have three lists available: union list, state list, concurrent list. If there is a tax that is mentioned in union list, it is the central government who will be getting the power to frame rules and regulation by using parliament rule. Okay. If it is there in state list, list 2, it means that it is the legislative assembly who will be getting the power to frame rules and regulation. If it is concurrent list, it will be the both government who will be getting this particular power. This is the understanding that we need to have from Article 246. So if you want to introduce a new tax in India, be it GST or income tax, whenever it was introduced as a fresh, first thing that the government would have done was to go and check on the constitution part. And if that is already there in one of these lists in constitution, it is very simple understanding. Now, what is that they have to do? They have to frame rules and regulation, either in parliament they'll do it, or they will do it in legislative assembly, depending upon which government is going to frame rules and regulation. So if you want to get an answer on this, there are two-step process to frame a new particular tax. One is constitutional check. If that particular tax is not there in constitution, first I have to bring that particular taxable item inside constitution, which means that I have to do a constitutional amendment. Now, how can I amend the constitution? Again, you will have to go to the parliament to amend the constitution. Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha approval is required for constitutional amendment. So, step 1 would be constitutional check. Constitution is already having this tax, no problem. If it is not having this particular tax, I'll have to amend the constitution, bring this tax. Can I collect taxes from the very next day? The answer is no. You will have to move to framing the act for that, because Article 265 says that you will have to have an act behind collecting any taxes that if you want to. Are you guys understanding this? Okay. So if GST was to be introduced, if I wanted to introduce GST, what would have been the route? First, they would have opened this book called Constitution and checked whether the government has power to frame rules and regulation relating to GST, whether the government has power to frame GST Act or not. If the government has power to frame GST Act, okay, government had the power to frame GST Act, then there is no problem. Assuming that government is not having this particular power to frame GST Act, then they will have to amend the constitution, get the power. Okay, they have to amend the constitution and get the power. After that, they will have to frame GST Act and pass it in the Parliament or Legislative Assembly. Then only they can collect the taxes. This is the structure in which you are introducing a new taxes in India. Are you understanding? If you're understanding, when I'm asking the question, you can put a yes on the chat box. So let our chat box be very active, so that at least your yeses are there, so that I understand you're actively attending and you're listening to all the questions that I'm asking you. So are you good with this? Have you understood the initial basic part? Great. Then, before I move to GST, let me give you a very small understanding on the earlier taxation system that we had. Okay. Before introduction of GST, we had 4 taxes which were mainly collected as indirect taxes. Okay, there were a lot of taxes, but 4 of these taxes were mainly collected as indirect taxes. And I'm going to discuss just one sentence about each one of these taxes that we had. They were central excise duty, service tax, sales tax, and customs duty. We had how many taxes? 4 of them. Excise duty, service tax, VAT, CST. Okay, sales taxes we can call VAT, CST, we can call it a sales tax, and customs duty. Central excise duty was levied on. So one sentences is talking about what is the taxable event of these taxes, whether it is levied on goods or services, who is the payer of these taxes, and to which government it goes to. Excise duty was levied on manufacture of goods and it was paid by manufacturer to central government. I'm talking about central excise duty. And service tax was levied on provision of services and it was paid by service provided to the central government. So the understanding is that excise duty and service tax was a very prominent taxes that we had on manufacture and services before introduction of GST. And both of these were paid to central government. Now we have VAT and CST, which are sales taxes. And VAT and CST is not levied on same type of sales. Okay, value added taxes is VAT and central sales tax is CS. Now, value added taxes was levied on intra-state sale, which means that the sale happening within the state. And in CST was levied when the sale was happening between the states. And both of these taxes were levied on goods and paid by dealer to state government. Understanding is very important that sale was a state subject. Sale was a state subject. The tax on sales was paid to state government. And customs duty was levied on import and export of goods, and import or exporter pays this to central government. Now, when they wanted to introduce GST, so the discussion of GST started very, very long back. Okay, so the discussion of GST is not something happened very recently with India. In India itself, the discussion happened since 2000. That means that we've been talking about or thinking about or planning to implement GST since 20 years. So it took a long time for the government to reach to the target of really implementing GST. So your understanding is this. When GST discussion was happening in the parliament, before introduction of GST, when the discussion was happening in the parliament, what would have happened? The MP, whoever is discussing this, would have shown this particular taxes and said, see guys, okay, assume all of you guys are other member of parliament and we're having a parliamentary discussion. No parliamentary behavior, parliamentary discussion. Okay. Now assume that all of you are sitting in the parliament. I'm also sitting in the parliament and discussing with you what should be the taxes that we have to implement on indirect tax regime in India. This is our discussion that was going on. So I'm showing you on the screen that what are the taxes that we have before GST. So my discussion is before GST. Now I'm telling you that we have taxes like central excise duty, service tax, VAT and CST and customs duty. What we propose in GST, what is that we propose? We propose to unify all of this and introduce a new taxation law. So when we are merging all of these taxes, am I planning to merge every taxes including customs duty? The answer is no. I'm merging excise duty, service tax, VAT and CST. And the new taxes, if I'm merging taxes which were paid to central government as well as state government, if I'm paying taxes that was, if I'm merging taxes which were supposed to be paid to central government as well as state government, then your understanding is that the revenue has, the new taxes, revenue has to go to both central government and state government. And the new taxes will be called as goods and service tax because I'm merging taxes relating to goods as well as service. And on what event I should collect this particular taxes? When I'm merging, see, I'm going to ask you an understanding based question. When I'm saying that I'm merging excise duty, service tax, VAT and CST, does that mean that tomorrow there will not be any tax on manufacture, service and sales? Or, okay, that is option A. Okay, so the moment I merge these taxes, then there will not be any tax on manufacture, service and sale. Or second understanding is, when I say I'm merging, I meant there will be taxes on manufacture, sales and service. But earlier I was calling it in different name. Now I'm all of these taxes on manufacture, service and sales, all of them are going to be called as GST. Which is the understanding? The second understanding is the correct one. Isn't it? So I'm merging all of this, which means that the taxable event, the event on which GST has to be levied, the event on which GST has to be levied, whether it should include all of this. When I'm doing manufacture, I should levy GST. When I'm doing services, I should levy GST. When I'm doing sales, I should levy GST. So the taxable event for GST, on what GST has to be levied, should include manufacture, service and sales. But in together, we are going to call it as supply. So the taxable event has been renamed in GST as supply. So these 3 points relating to GST is a common sense understanding. You, even without GST actually in practice, we can say that these are the 3 fundamental understanding of GST has to happen. The tax will be called as goods and service tax. Second one, the revenue will go to central government as well as state government. And the taxable event is supply. Now, customs duty, is it still in existence or it also got merged under GST? The answer is it is still in existence. So what are the 2 major indirect taxes that we have today? One is GST, another one is customs. Now, we are starting off with our examination discussion, including an amendment that we have in this particular area. After we decided that we need to implement GST, in India, government started searching, because are we the first country to introduce GST or are we one of the last countries to introduce GST? We are kind of one of the last countries to introduce GST. So the government started searching. On what purpose? Government started searching on, can we implement the popular model of GSTs in the world itself into India, or should we develop a new model? That was the discussion. So for that, we need to understand what were the popular model of GST in the world. Because see, when you're introducing something after everybody introduced, the good thing that you can do is that you can copy, right? Say in your classroom, the teacher is asking everyone to speak on a topic, and she has given you already the topic. And say, suppose the topic is GST. Suppose you are the last one to speak. What is the best thing that you can do? You need not think so much of new points, because already people have spoken. You can copy from all those points and then make a good speech, right? Similar to that, India, when they are implementing GST, they started analyzing what are the models that is available in the world. There were 2 very popular models called as central GST model and state GST model, with one fundamental. What is the fundamental that we have in picking the model? The revenue has to be shared between central government and state government. And in India, we have a federal structure where we have state governments given a lot of power by constitution itself. So when government was searching for a model, only intention that they had is that this sharing between central and state has to be easier. So first they looked into central GST model, which was a very popular model wherein the entire tax will be collected by central government and one share can be shared back to state government. Or they looked into state model wherein the entire revenue will be collected by state government and one share will be shared back to central government. Can we implement these models in India? Do you think it is it will work in India to implement a model like central GST model where central government collect everything, give to state government one share? The answer is no. Practically, it is not possible for, or it will not be agreed by central and state to implement that kind of a model. Say, central government wants to give some money to state government. Then every time there is some political issue, then they'll all say that central government has not shared or central government is using politically on sharing this particular revenue. So state will not take the chance. States will not take the chance wherein state governments will be very surely saying that, see, we do not want to have my revenue collected by central government. So we would prefer a model where both central government and state government gets directly from the guy who is paying the taxes their own respective model, respective revenues. So they decided to implement not very popular model, but the ideal model for India, which is dual GST model. What is dual GST model? Let's look into what is dual GST model. In dual GST model, the taxable event. What is the taxable event for GST? What was the taxable event? It is supply. So the taxable event supply has been classified into. So the taxable event supply. Okay, so the taxable event supply has been classified into two. One is intrastate supply, another one is interstate supply. Now, what do you mean by intrastate supply? Intrastate supply means the supply that is happening within the state or union territory. And interstate supply means supply that is happening between the states or union territory. For the time being, you understand that supply will be called as intrastate supply when it is within the state, and it will be called as interstate supply when it is between the states. So in dual GST model, instead of collecting one taxes, in intrastate supply, we are going to collect two taxes. One is central GST, another one is state GST or union territory GST. What is union territory GST? We'll come back to that. So for the time being, you understand that when there is supply that is happening within the state or union territory, instead of collecting one GST, they're collecting two GSTs. And CGST and SGST will be the name that is given for that. It will be shared between central and state in the ratio of 50-50. And when there is intrastate supplies happening, CGST will be paid to the central government and SGST will be paid to the state government. If it is UTGST, that will be paid to the respective union territories also. Okay. So there are separate act dealing with all of this in this particular model. So after they picked up the model, they decided to frame act for it. So for collecting CGST, they have framed an act called as CGST Act 2017. It was amended further in every year with different act. That is our major syllabus. So we have provisions mostly to discuss only from CGST Act. Then we have SGST Act passed in, where SGST Act would have been passed in respective legislative assemblies, it would have been passed. Now, if it is an interstate supply, instead of CGST, SGST, there is an integrated GST that is being collected, which is called as IGST. IGST is nothing but CGST plus SGST, and it is paid to central government, and there is a separate act called as IGST Act for understanding that. Now let's take a very basic transaction and then get some understanding on it. GST will be applicable when there is supply of goods. We use the word and or service. It can be goods or it can be service or it can be goods and service. So whenever there is supply of goods and or services, we will have GST applicable. The one who is making the supply, will be called as supplier. and the one who's receiving the supply will be called as recipient. So the consumer will be in GST termed as recipient. The seller or manufacturer or service provider will be called as supplier. Suppose this particular product that is here sold is a mobile phone worth 10,000. On this mobile phone, what will be applicable? GST will be applicable. What are the common rates of GST that we have? General rate. We have 5%, 12%. Payable GST, okay, there is exemptions, all that is there, 0, nil and all that. But let us take the GST payable rates generally are, what is the maximum rate? 28%. These are the general rate that we have for GST at this particular point. 5%, 12%, 18%, 28%. So a mobile phone is subject to GST at 18%. Okay, which means that when there is mobile phone sale on 10,000 rupees, there will be GST applicable of 1,800. So the moment the recipient gets the supply, he will have to pay something called as consideration, which will be 11,800. The supplier can keep his money, which is 10,000. The balance 1,800 will have to be paid to the government. It depends on whether it is intrastate supply or interstate supply. They will decide how the split has to be. Suppose the supplier is located in Tamil Nadu and recipient is also located in Tamil Nadu. If that's the case, this is called as an intrastate supply. If that's the case, this 1,800 will be divided as CGST and Tamil Nadu SGST. What is the ratio? 50-50, which means 9%, 9%. This will be shared between central government and state government in the ratio of 50-50. So I will ask the supplier, suppose it is Reliance Digital, okay, which is the supplier supplying mobile phone. It will be divided in the ratio of 50-50 and 900 will have to be paid to central government and this 900 will be paid to state government. Which state government? Tamil Nadu. Now who pays this particular amount to Tamil Nadu state government? It will be paid by supplier itself. So what is the benefit of this particular dual GST model? Instead of asking central government to share to state government in intrastate supply, I'm asking supplier itself. Hey supplier, if you give full money to central government, now I'll have to go to the central government and ask for a share. Or if you give full money to state government, now central government will have to ask the state government for his share. Avoid this particular scenario. They are saying that let us not do this particular aspect. Rather, what we will do, we will ask the supplier itself to divide this particular amount. We will ask the supplier itself to divide this particular amount and ask them to, we will ask the supplier to divide this amount, ask them to pay respectively to central government and state government. So if this particular company, if this particular supplier is not paying, if this supplier is not paying taxes, who will catch them? It will be both central government and state government who will have the power to catch this supplier itself. Are you understanding the differences here? Are you understanding it? So this particular model is of course the ideal model for GST in India. What if the supply is interstate supply? What is the supply is interstate supply? Suppose Reliance Digital it is making supply we'll take our friend from the session itself. It is making supply to Sonia. Suppose Reliance Digital is located in Bangalore and Sonia is located in Kochi, Kerala. This is in Karnataka. And making a supply of a mobile phone. And value happened to be 10,000. GST rate will it be the same, or will it change when it is interstate supply? It will be the same. So 1,800 is the GST. Here also, what you have to understand, as the consumer, as the recipient, you don't need to bother whether it is intrastate supply or interstate supply. What you will do, you will end up paying 11,800 as usual. Now this Reliance Digital, this time this 1,800 GST will be called as what? 1,800 GST will be called as IGST, and this will be paid to central government. Reason being, the supply is an interstate supply. Okay. If that's the case, can central government treat the entire 1,800? Can central government keep the entire 1,800 as their revenue? Can they keep? No. Because IGST is equal to CGST plus SGST. Right? IGST is equal to CGST plus SGST. So what is that central government has to do? The SGST portion of IGST that has to be shared back to state government. So out of this 1,800, only 900 belongs to central government. Balance 900 belongs to state government. Which is state government? It will be the consuming state which gets the revenue. So another important point that you need to understand, which act as a fundamental for our GST discussion, is whenever there is interstate supply happens, which means supply is happening between the states, which government gets the revenue? It will be the consuming state that gets the revenue. So from Karnataka, there is a sale that is happening to Kerala. It is Kerala which is the consuming state. Or from Delhi, somebody is purchasing, a seller in Delhi is selling goods to some consumer in Gujarat. Which will be the consuming state? Gujarat will be the consuming state. So when central government collects this particular taxes, IGST, they are saying that we will share back. We will share the SGST portion to the consuming state government. Okay. So since the consuming state government should get the revenue, we are not able to pay the revenue. We are not able to split and pay CGST, SGST. We are not able to split and collect the CGST, SGST directly from the supplier. Instead, supplier will pay entire amount to central government. Central government will find out who is the consuming state and then pay to them. And there is a mechanism, provisions fixed to allocate which will be the consuming state. For the time being, our consuming state will be the state of the recipient. Are you guys with me on this? Okay. Now let's get back to our discussion on this. What is that we have to additionally understand here? We have an amendment to discuss. Number 1. What we need to understand here is that our country, as per Article 1 of Constitution, is divided into states and union territories. So we have state as well as union territories. Question to you is this: what is the speciality of union territories? How many union territories we do have? Before two changes that has come for this May 2021 examination, we had 29 states and 7 union territories. We had 29 states and 7 union territories. Okay. Some have their own legislative assemblies and some under control of the central government. Yeah, very good answer, Akshara. So all these union territories are a different structure in India. Now, why do we have union territories? Because of some reason, government decided we need not attach it to the state. To give you an example, some of them were French colonies. Okay, they had a different structure, different kind of buildings, different monuments to protect. So, central government said we will keep it aside. Some of them were coastal places, some of them were islands. So, they decided, okay, let's keep it in that order. So, which are the union territories that we already know? We had Delhi, Pondicherry, which is one type of union territories. And we had another 5 types of union territories, which made it 7 before the amendment. So we had Delhi, Pondicherry, as you can see it on the screen, we had Delhi, Pondicherry, Daman, Diu, Lakshadweep, Andaman, Dadar Nagar Haveli, Chandigarh. These were the union territories that we had. Now, why we separated Delhi and Pondicherry from other union territories? Because Delhi and Pondicherry, even though they were union territories, they had a state government. They are union territories with state government. Now, if in GST, if supply happens within a union territory, meaning which a supplier in Delhi, okay, there is a supplier in Delhi, and he makes supply to, there is a supplier in Delhi and he is making supply to a recipient in Delhi, whether it will become intrastate supply or interstate supply. Supplier in Delhi is making supply to a recipient in Delhi, will it become an intrastate supply or interstate supply? It will become an intrastate supply. Now, in an ideal scenario, since it's an intrastate supply, there should be CGST and SGST that is applicable, right? CGST and SGST that is applicable. Now, generally, where SGST Act will be passed? In the Legislative Assembly. So, if I have to collect SGST, government is very clear on its understanding. Government says that 50% share central government will keep, balance 50% will be given to state government or union territory, because they also require money to operate. There will be IAS officers there will be mechanism there will be local bodies who's running it. So there is revenue that is required for them as well. So they decided 50% will be kept with central government, 50% will be given to state government or union territory. For the state government, generally to collect taxes, for them to collect taxes, they have something called as Legislative Assembly, through which they will pass an act called as SGST Act. In Delhi and Pondicherry, even though they are union territories, they have something called as Legislative Assembly. So their bigger advantage comes in, even though they are union territory, they have Legislative Assembly. So these union territories, can they pass SGST Act in their Legislative Assembly? The answer is yes. So in Delhi and Pondicherry, even though they're union territory, they can pass SGST Act. So if somebody is making an intrastate supply in Delhi and Pondicherry, it will have CGST and SGST itself. Are you guys clear on this? It is almost like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, any other state. Okay, so we know that Delhi has Arvind Kejriwal, the CM of Delhi and all that. Now, other union territories, which are the one? Daman, Diu, Lakshadweep, Andaman, Dadar Nagar Haveli, Chandigarh. The problem was that they don't have a state government. It's central government who's appointing people there and then running it. So, if that's the case, if Lakshadweep, somebody from Lakshadweep made a sale to somebody in Lakshadweep. Okay, so Lakshadweep to Lakshadweep, if there is some sale that is happening, whether it will become intrastate supply or it will become interstate supply. Intrastate supply or interstate supply. It is an intrastate supply. Perfect. So if Lakshadweep to Lakshadweep is also intrastate supply, then how will Lakshadweep government collect their tax share? Can they pass an Lakshadweep SGST Act in their Legislative Assembly? There is no Legislative Assembly. So government decided to ensure that these people also collect taxes for all of these particular, for all of them together, for all of these particular union territories put together, we will pass an act in the parliament and then give it to them. So there must be an act. That's the only requirement. So they decided we will pass a UT-GST Act in the parliament. So instead of SGST, the same share, same amount will be given to the union territory as UT-GST Act. So in return, we can say that all the states and Delhi and Pondicherry will have SGST. Other union territories will have UT-GST instead of SGST. This is the structure that we have. Now, what are the two changes that we have? Places like Daman Diu and Dadar Nagar Haveli, both of them, Daman Diu and Dadar Nagar Haveli, both of them are there in Gujarat. Okay, both of them are there in Gujarat. And Gujarat coastal places, they were declared as union territory. Now, what is the amendment that we have? Are they union territory even now? Yes. Were they union territory earlier? Yes. Then what's the change? Earlier, Daman Diu and Dadar Nagar Haveli, these two were two separate union territories. Now, what is that they have done? They have merged them into one. So, read it on the screen. Daman and Diu and Dadar Nagar Haveli union territories got merged into one. What is the implication of that? I'll tell you the implication. Let's take an example. Say, our friend Rahul, he is in Daman. He is making supply to another person in Dadar Nagar Haveli. Okay, he's making supply to, suppose he is making supply to Meenu. There is a sale of mobile phone that's happening. Let's assume. Question to you is this an before amendment, Dadar and Daman, both of them are separate union territories. So the supply that is made from Daman to Dadar would have become interstate supply, but now it is an intrastate supply. Reason being, both Dadar and Daman are now considered to be one union territories. Are you understanding the implication? Earlier, these two were what taxes would come? CGST plus UTGST, no doubt. But earlier, it would have been IGST. Reason being, this was two separate union territories. Now this is one union territory. So it is almost like somebody supplying from Lakshadweep to Lakshadweep, because this is within one union territory. Now, since they merged these two, it will become just one union territory of Daman, Diu and Dadar Nagar Haveli, just one. Are you guys understanding this? Can I have a yes? Okay, perfect. Now, second change. What is the second change that we had? Reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir. Reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir is what? So, Jammu and Kashmir was enjoying an extra right. So, all that you have learned relating to Act and taxes and everything, you would have learned something else relating to Jammu and Kashmir. Like, you would have learned all the Act, and section 1 would say, this Act extends to whole of India. Then you would have learned in your textbook saying that this Act extends to whole of India except Jammu and Kashmir. Right? That is what you would have learned throughout. There are two questions that I have for you. Question number 1, when GST was introduced, now something happened with Jammu and Kashmir that becomes an amendment. But let us assume that we are discussing before the amendment. Okay, now we have abolished the article and then everything. But before even that, whether really GST was applicable to Jammu and Kashmir? Because GST also, when the Act becomes effective, it extends to whole of India except Jammu and Kashmir. So the question I have for you is whether GST was effective even to Jammu and Kashmir. Will it automatically be effective? The answer is no, it will not be automatically effective. But was it made effective later? The answer is yes. So GST was made effective and GST was applicable to Jammu and Kashmir by an ordinance which was passed on 8th of July. So when was GST introduced? When was GST introduced? GST was introduced on 1st of July 2017. 8th of July, they specifically made applicable GST to Jammu and Kashmir as well. So point number 1 is that GST was applicable to Jammu and Kashmir even then, by a specific ordinance that was made even applicable to Jammu and Kashmir. It was approved in Jammu and Kashmir as well. Now, what happened with Jammu and Kashmir? Now, why every act will not be applicable to Jammu and Kashmir? Because at the time of independence, Jammu and Kashmir was ruled by an Hindu king, wherein the population was Muslim majority. So they decided, there were confusion whether he has to join India or Pakistan. All that confusion was there. So he decided to join India with few conditions. He said there must be special powers that is to be given to Jammu and Kashmir. So they constituted something called as Article 370 in the Constitution, which gave extra powers to Jammu and Kashmir, saying that except for things like external affairs, defense, and telecommunication, these things, except these three things, any other thing that is made applicable to rest of India will not automatically be applicable to Jammu and Kashmir as well. This is what they have said. So they said, if you want to make a tax applicable to Jammu and Kashmir, it had to be approved by Jammu and Kashmir, because Jammu and Kashmir was invincible. They had a power by this article. They said, ask me. Only when I say yes, it can be made applicable to me. Don't put everything from Delhi to me directly. But then this particular article 370 was abolished. There was an act which was brought in 2019 called as on August 5th. Okay, they brought in something called reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, so this particular reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir, this particular act was abolishing this extra power that 370 had. But what did they do with Jammu and Kashmir? Jammu and Kashmir was a state earlier. Jammu and Kashmir was a state earlier. What they have done is that they had gone ahead and then removed that particular category of state from Jammu and Kashmir. And they've divided Jammu and Kashmir into two. What are the things that they've done? They removed 370. They changed the Jammu and Kashmir status from state to a union territory. And they've divided Jammu and Kashmir into Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Wherein Jammu and Kashmir is a union territory with state government, and Ladakh is a union territory without state government. Now we have added one more. Union territory to the category of Delhi and Pondicherry. We have one more union territory with the state government, which is Jammu and Kashmir. And we also have one more category for other union territory, which is pure, which does not have state government. Now, you tell me what will be the implication of GST. Now, Jammu and Kashmir, very recently there was an election and all that. So, Jammu and Kashmir status is changed from state to union territory. But in GST, do they have any implication? In GST, earlier it was having CGST and SGST. Even now it will have CGST and SGST. Reason being, Jammu and Kashmir is still having legislative assembly. They can pass a SGST act. So, they will still have CGST and SGST. But Ladakh was earlier part of Jammu and Kashmir. Now got separated. So Ladakh, if you make a supply intra-state, instead of CGST and Jammu and Kashmir SGST, earlier it would have come. Now they will have Ladakh Union Territory UT GST that is applicable. Are you guys with me? So Ladakh gets added to Union Territory like Lakshadweep, Daman, Diu, and Andaman and all that, and Chandigarh and all that. But instead of that, Jammu and Kashmir will have the same status, CGST and SGST. Now, there is one more question I have. Say, one seller located in Jammu and Kashmir, he makes a sale to a person located in Ladakh. Whether this is intrastate or interstate. Intra or inter. Right now it becomes interstate. Reason, Jammu and Kashmir is a separate union territory with state government, and Ladakh is a separate union territory now. So this becomes an interstate supply. Earlier it was an intrastate supply. This is the change that we have. Are you guys with me on this? Okay, great. So in summary, now how many states are there? How many states I have? What is the total number of states now? We have 28 states because Jammu and Kashmir is gone. How many union territory with state government? 3. So totally 31 of them will have CGST plus SGST. Earlier I had how many union territories? How many union territories were there? Pure union territories where UTGST will be applicable. It was 5 of them, and Daman Diu and Dadar Nagar Haveli, it got merged. So it became 4, but Ladakh got added. So it became again 5. Union territory, we can call it as pure union territories. That is 5 of them. They'll have CGST and UTGST. This is the summary of our amendment discussion. Is it clear? Can I have a yes? Okay.
Subscribe to LearnCab and hit the bell icon to get notified.